Okay, it's 12:30. I'd like to call this meeting of Corporate Services to order. And I will look to members of the committee to see if there are any disclosures of pecuniary interest. Okay, seeing none, let's move on to the consent agenda. Any items in there that you'd like to discuss? There's only one. Seeing none, is there a mover for that? Councillor Van Holst, is that a question or moving it?
No, I can move that.
Okay, seconder, Councillor Zafman. Any discussion on the access and privacy policy? Councillor Zafman, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a brief comment, getting a chance to read through this. Just wanted to say through you, thank you to our clerk staff for getting this done. This is, I think, something that has been trying to work on for quite a long time, and trying to get this policy through and have it here and have it concrete so that we and the public can know how to address these issues best. So it's nice to have this on the books soon.
Deputy Mayor Hubert.
How much control do we have over the fees?
Ms. Skalski.
Thank you. Through the chair, the fees are legislated, so we have no control over them.
Well, I'll just say anywhere else in the world, 20 cents per page for photocopies is ridiculous. You go to a government office, a provincial government office, and I'll tell you it's a lot higher than that. It's like it can be anything from 75 to $1.25 a page, and $30 an hour, which is basically what this adds up to, is nominal. It's not even covering the staff time. So I would say, obviously we have to pass this, but I would say back through you, Mr. Chair, to staff, that there needs to be some direction back to the government to say, $5 is not a meaningful amount to charge, and that the charges are out of line with what would be appropriate for such onerous work. So.
Well, if we needed another reminder of how much municipalities are creatures of the province these days, there's one there too. Any other discussion on the access and privacy? Councillor Van Holst.
Thank you. Just a question through you to staff. The definition of head is referred to the act. It shows up a bunch of times in our document. Could you just have a brief description of what how the act describes the head? Was there a little more clarification we can get?
Thank you. Through the chair. So the head, by definition, is council under the act. Council has delegated that authority to the city clerk by bylaw. The head is responsible for executing the provisions under the act, so accepting freedom of information requests and administering the provisions for the program.
That's great. Thank you.
I don't see any of the discussion. Just briefly from the chair, I think we have the legislation, which for those who love reading legislation, I think they can figure out what the process is supposed to be by reading the legislation. But I think this is a much better and more practical guide, especially for staff who are needing to administer and handle these requests. I think it's really helpful to have it written out in this kind of way. I do worry that keeping it up in sync with what's happening with the legislation may prove to be a bit of a challenge, but I'm sure that we'll stay on top of that as things change over time. Okay, let's open the vote on that.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
That brings us to item 3.1. This is a public participation meeting, not to be heard before we started the meeting, about the time of our meetings, the annual meeting calendar. So it's 12:35, so let's get a motion to open up the public participation meeting. Mayor Brown, Deputy Mayor Hubert, seconding. Any discussion? No? Let's open the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Okay, I will look to see if there's any kind of introductory remarks at all from our staff before we open up the public meeting for input.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I wanted to know whether it would be helpful for me to summarize the number of surveys and the breakdown. I didn't do that in the report because we were still receiving it as we're writing it. So if that's helpful, I can certainly give you a summary.
Go ahead.
So we had 342 completed surveys. Of that, 129 voted yes to daytime meetings, 150 voted no to daytime meetings, and 61 voted that it made no difference to them as to the time of the day. 247 answered yes to having attended a city council or standing committee meeting. 55 answered no to having attended a meeting. And 40 answered yes to watching meetings on live stream. Other respondents, 175 members of the public responded, 12 mayoral or city council candidates responded, 84 city staff with respect to management employees responded, and 64 unionized staff responded.
Thank you for that summary. Councillor Zafman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I may have missed the last point, just looking for some clarification. So of the total of 300, and so that breakdown that you just gave of staff that responded, is that inclusive in that number of 300, or is that from the public and then separated into staff?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's separated. So of the 342 respondents, 84 were management staff at the city and 64 were unionized city staff. The rest were either members of the public or candidates in the current election.
Okay, I'm going to go to the members of the public. I see 2 members of the public in the audience. I think perhaps I know what Mr. Shepherd is here for. It may not be this one. We are talking about the annual meeting calendar. Okay, ask a second time. Third time, okay. Moved by Deputy Mayor Hubert, seconded by Councillor Zafman. Let's get that vote open.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Okay, colleagues, I just would like to seek your advice. As you know, Councillor Morgan is away. He's attending Federation of Canadian Municipalities board meeting this week. And as you would recall from previous debates, I have some fairly strong opinions about the annual meeting calendar. I'm looking to see if there's a member of the committee who maybe has less strong opinions who actually wants to chair the meeting. If not, I will do it. Mayor Brown? Okay. Perhaps I'll pass the chair to you. We can maybe stay in the same seats, but if you could chair from this point on. Thanks.
Works for me. Okay, so the public participation portion of the meeting has been closed, and I'll look now for speakers. Councillor Van Holst.
Thank you very much. Thank staff for all their work. I guess there's a bit of an irony that there's no one here to speak on this. Public participation meetings are definitely needed. I don't think that they're the best form of engagement. Public speaking being one of the greatest fears of humanity, it seems maybe a bit much to ask people to come here and overcome that fear while speaking, while hoping to engage with their local government. So maybe, Mr. Chair, we need an alternative. I'm suggesting a terminal where people can type their thoughts. It's at the end of a thin, bouncy catwalk at the top of One London Place, so they can overcome their fear of heights while engaging. Perhaps a claustrophobic room with spiders could round that out and accommodate everyone. Now, when I look at our report, what I see is a great method of public engagement, because I hear just in section D, although, as the clerk said, not everybody was, all the results had been in, there was over 225 that I was able to get through in an hour, and had a written record of them. I could count them up and do some statistics. So there's some very interesting information that comes out of this. When I looked for people that made comments on quality, the quality of the work that would be done in day or nighttime meetings, there were 19 that said daytime meetings would improve the quality versus only 7 that said the quality would go down. When I looked at ones that described how the operations would go, 18 said it would be better operationally versus 6 that said it'd be worse. And looking at the comments on finances, so 3 people said this would save us money versus 1 person who said it would cost us more. So those 3 metrics are almost 3 to 1 in favor of daytime meetings. So I think that says quite a bit. Another interesting piece of information was the number of people that said that our meetings that start at 4 p.m. are still daytime. And so really, we're right now in a position that is a daytime meeting. All our meetings are daytime for all intents and purposes for some people who work 9 to 5 or till 6 o'clock. So the nice thing about the calendar that clerks have prepared for the daytime meetings is we actually have addressed that situation by providing public participation meetings in the evening. So that's a solution to that, which is superior to the method we've got right now. So it's interesting that because of this point, people not being able to attend the 12 and 4 p.m. meetings already, it's almost a little bit of noise in the statistics for the people that said their comments saying that they wouldn't be able to come during the day, because that's the case it is already. So those are maybe the comments I need to make now. I have others, but perhaps I'll turn it over to my colleagues. Oh, with one exception, I had in the past asked for the financial implications of some of what we do, and that is the recognized management overtime. So some of our employees who have to stay late with us while we discuss things are given a what's called recognized management overtime. It's essentially just vacation time in lieu of being paid overtime, and it has the effect of reducing the amount of work that's done because they're on vacation when they would otherwise be. Mind you, people still have to do the work if we had a daytime meeting, but I think this would be a little more efficient, as a lot of the people who commented said it would. So I'm going to go to ask through you to our staff just to tell us what, I know all they can probably tell us is the total amount of recognized management overtime, and then what we'll have to do is realize that it's going to be some proportion of that, but nevertheless, it is a figure, and it's good for us always to know what the financial implications of our decisions are. So through you to Mr. Haywood. Mr. Hayward.
Mr. Hayward or Ms. Barbone? Mr. Hayward?
Through the chair, yes, if you want the total amount for recognised management overtime last year, there are some qualifiers that I will also give you on it, but it was 296,000 in round numbers. Not everybody on that list attends council meetings, so it doesn't in any way relate to the after-hours meeting side of it. And not everybody who attends council meetings actually receives RMO. Some people are actually on a flex time program, which is, it's an either-or that you can be on. So how you precisely tie that number in is really difficult because there's so many other projects and after-hours meetings that people attend that it would be very difficult to actually tie in who does what to each meeting. And the third aspect is that when you get RMO, it's not an hour for hour, so it doesn't reflect the full hours that are put in either. So I'll just add that as well.
Thank you. You've just hit your 5 minutes prior to asking the question. Can I come back to you once we go through the additional speakers? Okay. Other speakers? Councillor Zaveman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I probably could have taken the chair on this one as well. I have some opinions on this, but frankly, I think just by looking at the survey numbers, 150 no and 129 yes and 69 that are not really decided, gives us a clear message that people are divided and things work now for some and things don't work well for others. And frankly, I don't know if we're ever going to get to a situation where we're going to find that fine balance that it works well for everybody. I think how we have things now, the major reasonings that I've heard from the surveys that people have responded with, people appreciate the opportunity to come to meetings after work hours generally. For the 4 o'clock and beyond, we could certainly potentially look at maybe having that start a little later, but in addition to that, every time we go a little bit later, the closer that we get to our 11 o'clock general deadline stop time. So, I think we have to be cognizant that yes, we can put things back a little farther, but as we do that, we also have to think about managing our time. And I think that that's already been a bit of a struggle. And so I don't generally see a big urge to change this right now. I think frankly, the biggest aspect which I've heard in the yes category was employee overtime, which was just addressed, and childcare, which is something that has been talked about by a member or by this council and brought up, I think, by Council Ridley a little while back. So, maybe there are ways we can address that and assist in that aspect to have council meetings more viable for some individuals, but I don't really see a huge necessity to change these times right now.
Other speakers? Councillor Helmer?
Thank you. So I think now is certainly the time to be changing the meeting schedule so we have more of our meetings during the day. Generally speaking, I think better decisions are made during the day rather than later at night. And I think when I look around at what other municipalities are doing, London is a member of the Big City Mayors Caucus at Federation of Canadian Municipalities. So I thought, I'll take a look at what the other members of the Big City Mayors Caucus, how they run their councils and when they have their meetings. So the answer is that for the vast majority of them, they meet during the day. They have standing committees are during the day, the council meetings are during the day, committee of the whole is during the day, and they have variations on public hearings and public participation meetings, some of which are in the evening, some of which are not, they're in the middle of the day. So there's some variation, but generally speaking, all of the big city mayors, municipalities have meetings during the day. And I think it makes sense because once you reach a certain size and complexity of the municipality, the workload becomes so heavy that there's a lot of things on the agenda, right? I know that in recent discussions around the city of Toronto, councillors there were saying, we deal with 400 items at a council meeting, right? Like it's a huge undertaking and there's a lot of work to be done. Not all of those things are debated and not all those things are things that the public is particularly interested in, but it is a lot of work. And so getting it in the middle of the day is where people are sort of at their best, freshest, they're focused. Staff can come in and out to speak to the items that they need to be there for, and otherwise they can go back and do the work that they need to do outside of council chambers. So I think we need to be moving that direction. The question is, when is it going to happen? I think it's kind of a one-way move. I've never seen a municipality switch to having meetings during the day and then say, well, this isn't really working. We're going to go back to the way it was before. And just to give people a sense, Calgary meets at 8:30, Montreal meets at 8:30, Mississauga meets at 9, Toronto meets at 9:30, Vancouver meets at 9:30, Winnipeg meets at 9:30, Brampton meets at 9:30, Edmonton meets at 9:30, Ottawa meets at 10, Halifax meets at 10. There are standing committees throughout the day at various times, usually in the morning, but some also in the afternoon, early afternoon, like in around 1:30. So I think it's sort of proven that it works pretty well. I don't think that these councils are running any worse than ours because of the time of day. I think members of the public are able to engage in the decision-making that's happening at those other municipalities. I've been to Toronto City Council meetings where the gallery is absolutely packed with people who want to participate in the meeting and to observe what's happening. And I think we need to recognize that, technology has made it very easy for people to observe what is going on in a way that just wasn't possible even 10 years ago. So now everything is live streamed, it's archived. We make it much easier for people to participate when they can't be physically present. And I think we've seen that even compared to the previous term of council. I would say just anecdotally, there's fewer people in the gallery for most of the discussions. I don't think that's just because of the technology side, but I think that's part of it. It's just becoming more normal to keep an eye on things via a live stream. So I think making the change is important, but I do think there are trade-offs. The way things are now, I think works pretty well for some people who are on council now, some people who are thinking about being on council, and I think that's important. I think it works well for some staff who are reporting to certain committees, and it works less well for others. This committee, of course, has been meeting during the day, basically the entire term of council. Just generally speaking, our current meetings are about 70% after 4 o'clock, and I'm talking council standing committees and then the boards and commissions, at least that I'm on. 70% after 4 o'clock and 30% before 4 o'clock. So we already have a lot of meetings during the day. The question is, when should council and SPPC in particular be? And I think moving them during the day is really appropriate. Council meetings, for one thing, we always have the dinner break. And I think that is a real impact. I would rather start the meeting at 9:30 in the morning and work our way through, and then maybe we finish by lunch, rather than having a dinner break that constantly is interrupting the meeting. And I think that there's a lot of time that's spent in the dinner breaks, added up over 95 or 100 meetings in a council term, which is fine time, but I think if it was at the end, it would be much better than in the middle of the meeting. I think it makes it hard for the public to actually pay attention to what's going on. There's this discontinuity, and they don't know when to come back to the chambers. How long exactly is it going to be? When is the dinner break going to happen? And we've tried to be clear about expectations, but I think that having those meetings in the evening is causing those issues. So I'd like to keep fewer meetings in the evening, keep them focused on public participation. If we can have only public participation, for example, in the evening, and then we have the rest of the things during the day, I think that will work very well. I think that's what I got from most of the feedback from people in the responses, is that they're worried about the impact on public participation. And I don't think we need to force it into the day. And I don't think that's necessarily a wise thing. And I don't think that's what we're doing if we approve this meeting schedule. I do think that perhaps the planning meetings, right now it's suggested they start at 6:30. I think starting them a bit earlier would be smart. I think having, not necessarily at 4:30, but maybe a bit earlier, maybe 5 or 5:30 would be good, because I saw some of the feedback there. I think some of it is from planning staff actually, which is to say this is going to create a gap in the day between when I finish work and when I have to come to planning committee, and that's not really a good use of anyone's time. So I think that is something we should look at, and maybe we can bring it a bit forward so that we can maybe start the planning PPMs at 5:30, for example. I think that would be a reasonable change. So I'm interested to hear what my colleagues think, of course. I would say in terms of, is it now the right time to change it? I know the mayor has brought this up before. I think we should change it. It's not to come into effect until 2019, and whoever's on the next council, if they really don't like that change, they can just reverse it back to the other calendar, which is also before us. I think that's open to them to do, for example, in December.
Deputy Mayor Huber.
So I'm grinning because this is the time when you might say, this is not the right time. We're in the middle of an election to change the basic substance of the makeup and the way a city council runs, particularly if you're part of a big city thing. And then we have what's happening in Toronto. So I'll just sort of leave that aside for now. And there's a part of me that actually agrees with this argument. And hence, some year and a half ago, I made a motion on the floor of council, which was long before the guy by the name of Doug Ford ran for the provincial leadership, that would have shrunk the size of council to 10 and the mayor 11. And part of that was around the efficiency and some of the issues that are being raised in this. My colleagues resoundingly slapped that down, and it didn't really get out of the gate. But there is a conversation that needs to be had here around how council functions. I think it also has to deal with the compensation scale of council, and our understanding of the availability of councillors. And I think that's what particularly my two colleagues to the right are really stressing. However, I won't support it today. And I'm sure we'll have this debate next week at council. The clerk has done the best that she could do in terms of getting input by virtue of survey, but 300 people does not make, particularly with 50, somewhere close to 50% of them being inside, what I would call inside the ballpark, inside the hub, the bubble of City Hall, whether it be elected or staff or prospective candidates. I don't think that's engagement in the public. And quite frankly, we've had a number of these public participation meetings on issues that pertain to ward boundaries and governance issues at this committee over the past year and a half, 2 years. And this has been the turnout. None. Zip. And so I'm not comfortable, and I think this does fundamentally, it's a backdoor way of fundamentally changing the nature of the role of city councillor in the city. I don't think we have the buy-in at this stage of our term. I don't think we have the citizen engagement. They're all focused on the bazillion signs that are on street corners and on lawns and discussions around issues. They're not focused on this issue. And quite frankly, I haven't had a single email on this issue over the past several weeks. So I'm not comfortable with that. There may be some very good reasons, and Councillor Van Holst and Helmer raised some really good reasons. I just don't think we've had a fulsome conversation around that. And so quite frankly, I might see if there's an appetite to refer this to the next council. And we could vote it down, and then it would be no discussion. Or we could refer it to the next council for their consideration, because they'll be the group that most is affected by those changes. So I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, I'm going to move a referral for consideration by the new CSC. And quite frankly, I think I would refer it to Strategic Priorities and Policy Committee of the new council. I think we need broader engagement. And, you know, that committee meets at 4 p.m. and it could be scheduled into the evening so people could have access to it. So that would be my motion, Mr. Chair. Or I'll look for guidance from.
Okay, the recommendation before us is to advise the city clerk as to how we wish to proceed. And so there has been a motion to refer this to SPPC for the new council that's forming December 1st, 2018, and it's been seconded by Councillor Zafman. So the referral is on the floor. Any speakers to the referral? Councillor Helmer?
Well, I can see where this is headed, but I have to say to my colleagues, I don't think that that is a good idea. We need to set an annual calendar for 2019 now. We can't wait and just have it up in the air until sometime in December, right? As much as I say it could be changed in December, it's best if we put a calendar in place. Usually it would be in place a while ago, right? And people would know what's happening. Right now, there's no annual calendar. There's no meeting scheduled until we pass it, right? So I would say, if you don't want to do this, just vote against it. We should make a decision one way or the other. The next council can talk, I'm sure they will. If we change it or we don't change it, it's going to be a topic of discussion, I'm sure.
I'll look to the mover of the motion.
If I could, to my thinking on this, and I'm on the fly here, my thinking is that the calendar as it was previously proposed by the clerk would be the calendar until such time as a future council makes a decision. So if the concern is that it would be left in sort of a limbo, I would look through you for guidance from the clerk with that respect. But my concept here is not to leave the council without a calendar, but that we would revert to what had been previously proposed by the clerk. And then if the new council wants to consider changing that as of July 1st of 2019, or as of the new calendar year of 2020, that would be up to them. But I'd defer to the wisdom of Madam Clerk.
So I've touched base with the seconder, and the seconder agrees that the motion that's been brought forward is to use the existing calendar now and present the option to change to the new council in December of 2018. And I'll look to the clerk for some comments on that.
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, I concur with the chair. We do need a calendar approved. It should have been approved back in June. So it's difficult for the new council and for staff to prepare themselves for committees and council meetings if they don't have a calendar, which is why you have both before you, one based on the current practice and then one with daytime meetings. So either way, I would really appreciate having a calendar one way or the other.
And that, just so we're all clear, that's the motion that's on the floor, that would approve the existing calendar and refer this option to the next council. Councillor Van Holst.
Yes, thank you very much. I'd like to point out that we do not have an existing calendar. A calendar was not approved. We've been asked for two versions to look at. And we can check with the clerk, but I do not believe that we have an approved a calendar for next year.
Could be my choice of words, and I apologize for that. The traditional schedule. So we have two options before us, and the idea here is, but I'll go to the mover to give you some clarification.
Let me be helpful. A would be to approve the traditional council calendar. Part B would be to refer the consideration of a different calendar to the new council. So if I could do it as A and B, and then people can weigh in on that.
Okay. I'll split that vote.
Yeah, well, I have to call a point of privilege then, because approving the traditional calendar is not, does not take precedence over the, right, there's a move for referral, and then we're adding other motions to the referral. So again, like Councillor Hammer, I think we should, what we're essentially doing is the councillors attempting to approve the one calendar as opposed to the other. I know I'll be moving the daytime calendar. I'll be moving the daytime calendar, whether this next term as well. But I think it's important that, and now I'll just speak to the motion of the referral, if that's fine with you, Mr. Chair. So certainly a calendar is needed. We need a good idea of the direction that we're going. Councillor Helmer has pointed out that this is a good direction because that's the way other municipalities have gone. I pointed out that in the feedback we've got from the public, that there's also a strong majority saying that this is a better direction in terms of metrics, other than just the yes or no, which really doesn't apply since since both calendars fall into the same problem. So of having daytime meetings where people can't attend, like today. So I think it's that what we need to do is decide on a calendar that we're going to be going forward with. We should vote against the referral, make a decision, and let that go to council, because in the end, I'll be moving that we vote down the referral, and we're still gonna have to make the decision. So let's go to the actual decision. We can decide, as Councillor Helmer pointed out, the other new council can decide as well.
Okay, thank you. So we're going to deal with the referral first, and the referral is essentially referring the second option to next council. We'll have that vote in a moment, and there's no doubt in my mind that we'll be debating this at length at council as well. And so this is, I think, the beginning of the discussion. Councillor Helmer, please.
Well, I just wanted to remind everyone about what we've done so far. So we actually did have a discussion at SPPC about the annual meeting calendar. That was in June. And at that time, there was a motion to refer it to the next council. We debated that idea and we voted on that idea and that failed. Right, so 15 of us were not there. There was only 13 of us there and it failed 8-5. Then at council, we had a discussion and we passed doing this, which is bring these two forward, have a public participation meeting, discuss what is going to happen. So I'm not sure even that a referral really is in order. I mean, it only failed at SPPC, so I guess, you know, we technically didn't defeat it at council. But I think just sort of repeating the same process over again to just say, well, I want to just push it off into the next council. I mean, we have had that discussion. We had it months ago. And we made a decision at that time. So, I mean, I'm still against the referral. I'm against it for several reasons, but one of them is that I don't want to be trapped in an endless loop of talking about the annual meeting calendar. So perhaps maybe just voting on the calendars is a better way forward.
And I have indication from the mover and seconder, their willingness to withdraw the referral, which will help us get, I think, closer to a decision point at committee. But again, will be, no matter what's decided today, I think we need to be clear, there's going to be an extensive debate on this at council. Deputy Mayor Hubert.
So I'll withdraw the Part B referral, but I'll leave the motion to approve the, I hate the word traditional, but the normal or, yeah, ordinary calendar versus the extraordinary. I'm not sure what word's the best. No, because as you point out, that's a bit of a fallacy. So,
Okay, so that has been moved. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Zafman. Councillor Zafman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, I think, frankly, there are some good points made around the potential of a different type of calendar, but I think there is also a good point to be taken from Deputy Mayor Hubert. We are right in the middle of an election with about a month and a bit to go, where people have, I think, I don't know with certainty, but have looked at what this calendar is like for people that are running, so they would be running based off of this type of calendar. And I think if any substantive changes are going to be made, I think it's very reasonable for that to be left to the next council to decide that. I think we go as is for now, and that is where I'm comfortable with. And then when the next council comes in, if it's a council of people that are elected that are there on the basis of a different type of schedule, then that can be the way it is. But for now, I think this works well.
I'd like to make some comments as well, but I'll save that to the end. Councillor Van Holst.
Thank you very much. First, I'll extend my gratitude to my colleagues for withdrawing the referral. Just the fact this will be debated at length at council, we might be able to get through a few points here that minimizes that. So if we can come to some agreement on some terms, then this will be work done at the committee that isn't done at council, so that's great. It's unfortunate the timing is coming so close. I did move this back in 2017 and hoped that we would be dealing with it in January, and that was put off for a number of governance meetings. And then back at the beginning of the summer, I asked that we have our public participation meeting in July, and it was decided that we needed to give the public more time to be able to engage, and that this meeting would be a better time. We still have nobody here, but we do have many 300 92 or 42, depending on how well my scrawl here, comment. 42, okay, so, almost 350 comments, which is quite a bit. I think maybe I'll just ask through you to the clerk, is this a large number of comments relatively to when we go out for public participation? Is this a small, medium, or large sample of comments?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that depends on what the topic is, so that's a difficult question to answer. I can tell you we were pleased with the number of responses given that we were asking in the month of August for comments. So we were pleased with the number of responses we received, but whether it's a significant response, it depends on what the topic is.
Okay, well, what's the most responses and the least we might have gotten, if I can?
I would have to research that, and I'd have to go through the number of public engagements, track the numbers, and give you a report on that.
Okay, I was just looking for a gut feeling, but the fact that we're pleased with this amount with 342 is good. I'll also point out that I have no problem with the fact that many of these were from staff and counselors, because those are the people most engaged. And when we're going out asking, what's the impact of this, their impact is much more important, less so than a resident who may not be engaged at all, and really not that concerned, but however is providing opinions because we've asked for it. So in terms of the operational and quality aspects of the comments that we got, that difference is significant because we've got people who are actually in the trenches here with us. So let's talk about perhaps the virtues of the two calendars. Is the topic? I'm got 2 minutes to make a few points about that. The reasons that this is going to be an improvement for us, of course, is the fact that people are generally more alert. During the day, we may be able to organize things more efficiently. It's going to have a less impact on families and quality of life. Staying away from your family evening after evening after evening has a strong effect. This is hard. I notice that. I feel that. My family feels that. I'm sure it's the case for other counselors who are here at meetings in the evenings and then at other functions and other boards as well. One could be out 5 nights a week easily with a role like this. And that's the same for staff as well, who are often out at the PICs, public information centers, particularly our planning staff. They're out at those kinds of things all the time. I know that because I see them out there. So these kinds of impacts take their toll, and we should be looking at that as well. This new calendar gives us an opportunity to try something new and different, which is a good idea, and I think it's the direction we're going to go to. So if we just look at what's the end game, I think this is it. So why don't we just go there now and see how it goes? And if the new council has a huge problem with it, then they can change that, but at least we've set them up for what will be a win, because this is an improvement. Thank you.
Any other speakers? Okay, I'll just make a few comments if I could, and I'm happy to hand the chair back to Councillor Helmer. Thank you. So I'm reflecting back, and I've done this a few times over the past couple of months, to 2010 and the election, and the months leading up to the election, and a big push to move to full-time councillors and to daytime meetings. And here we are in 2018 having a very similar debate, a deja vu all over again type situation. It's difficult. It was difficult then because of the timing, and it's difficult to have this discussion now because of the timing, because there are just several weeks remaining in this term of council, less than 3 months. I approach this decision, I think, from a first principle perspective, which is as a council is coming to a close and preparing for the next council to take office, we want to set the council, we want to set the community up for maximum success. And I think that we can all agree on that. I also think about conversations I've had over the past 8 years, should we ultimately move towards daytime meetings? And I think that we should. I think that London is a big city, and that's a direction that we ought to be heading. I'm balancing that with the work that our Governance Review Task Force did in 2009 with a very strong recommendation after significant community consultation to maintain meeting times in the evening for public engagement. And we haven't done that kind of extensive review since that time. And I'm also balancing this out as I look at our committee, and I say this respectfully, but we've made a commitment to gender lens. And as we look at the committee makeup, we all reflect a certain demographic. And I think that I'm really looking forward to hearing from our colleagues at the debate at council in a week's time, because I think that we'll have many more opinions and many more life realities that can be brought to bear to talk about this. And then finally, I hesitate on this decision because we are mid-election. And there are dozens and dozens and dozens of candidates who have made a conscious decision to put their name forward to serve the community. And they did it just as I did in 2010 with the understanding that the structure would be the structure and that this is a potentially fundamental change that would occur just weeks before October 22nd. And I'm sensitive to that. So I am very clearly struggling with this decision today at committee, based on what I've heard, based on past reflections and past consultations. I'm inclined to support the mover and the seconder. But I'm going to be keeping an open mind, like we all do between now and council, and that vote could very well change. It's something that I would also encourage candidates who are seeking election to reach out to me, to reach out to all of us and share their opinions as well. I'd be very interested in hearing that, as well as community members to continue to do so. So I'll leave my comments at that. I think it's been an excellent discussion, and there's no doubt in my mind that we'll be having an extensive discussion next week as well.
Go ahead, Councillor Reynolds.
Thank you very much. I'm just going to encourage our mayor to change his mind on this and this is the reason, is that if this committee does support the move towards a daytime calendar, it will be a newsworthy item, which will bring up a lot more comments from the public. If we just let that die, it'll be unfortunate. It won't have the dialogue in the public that we could otherwise have. So if it's not a problem to go, if you're really constricted, I urge you and welcome you to vote against this at council and go in this direction, because there are reasons to support it. Thank you.
Mayor Brown.
I think I do need to address that. I'm not going to vote one way or another to influence a media cycle or to influence discussion in the community. I'm going to vote with a very serious, after very serious reflection on what's before us. I'm comfortable with my vote today, and I'll be keeping an open mind between now and next week.
Okay. I just want to check with the clerk, because it seems like this is an issue that might go one way at committee, and then we're going to have a fulsome discussion at council, and I want to make sure everyone's aware of the sort of chain of events that can happen, right? So if we were to pass the current meeting calendar now, and then it goes to council, the process there would be to defeat it at council, where it then becomes a decided matter of council, right? And can't really be changed until December. I just want to check with the clerk about that, or a 2/3 vote, I guess.
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's absolutely correct. It would have to be defeated at council, and then it's a decided matter.
So I think people need to just think that through. I'm not going to change my vote based on that consideration, but I think if you're thinking what is going to happen at council, what the default recommendation is from committee is pretty important. So with that, let's open up the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion is passed 3-2.
I'm sure nobody saw that coming. Let's move on to item 4.1. This is a request of a vehicle donation to Reforest London. And I would just see if there's any comments from our staff about the request from Mr. Shepherd. I see that he's in the public gallery here during the day. Go ahead.
Thank you, through the chair. So we've looked at this request, so it's really up to council. This is not something that is without precedent. There have been instances where organizations have come to the city and asked us to either donate used equipment or vehicles, et cetera. There's been a couple of over the years that council has endorsed and provided that. The one thing specifically with respect to the vehicle is that typically at the end of their useful lives, we do put those out to auction and do have proceeds. So we'd be foregoing approximately $10,000 worth of revenue that would be factored into our fleet services account that we would have to make whole. But aside from that, it's up to council. We'd be happy to provide a report back just to summarize the information. And the precedent in the past has been to do a bylaw should council wish to proceed.
With that information, colleagues, I'd just look to see how you'd like to proceed. Councillor Reynolds.
I have a question through you, Mr. Chair. Is there another way to accomplish this, to have a vehicle? Have we got some other way to have them get use of our vehicle?
So I'll just ask a clarification. Do you mean like by borrowing it, for example? Do you mean by borrowing it?
Oh, something like that, or a lease, or I don't know. What we're doing, what somebody's asked us to give them a vehicle. I'm wondering if there's another way to address their concern. So the problem is that they're lacking a vehicle. Have we got something else? I don't have a suggestion. I'm just wondering if there's something other than what's been requested that could solve the problem.
Through the chair to the committee, when Civic Administration was advised of the request being put forward from Reforest London, we did look at alternative solutions to the item that was presented. One of the items that we looked for consideration on was Reforest London to leverage our existing leasing agreements that we lease our existing trucks through on the seasonal period over the span of 6 months. However, based on discussions and the requirements from Reforest London, from my understanding, I believe that would not facilitate their requirements, which has led us back to their request for the donation of a vehicle.
Councillor Zafman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, I think this seems like a reasonable way to help out an organization in the city that does a lot of good for our community. I will say, though, that I'm just curious from our staff. I think the last time I recall some vehicle that we donated wasn't a truck. I think maybe it was a ambulance or a fire truck to, I can't recall where exactly. But beyond this, I'm just looking for some examples because while this may be a good idea, I have a feeling that there could be other organizations in the community, not-for-profits, that may see this as a potential benefit for them as well. And I don't think we have any sort of policy on how we deal with this. This is just sort of one-offs that has come to council. So just having that in mind, I think will be important.
Through to the chair to the committee, we have had over the past 2 decades donated probably about just under 10 pieces of equipment to various organizations. Some of the items have been a surplus trailer to St. John's Ambulance back in 2006. In 95, 98, 2002, 2008, 2009, we did donate access surplus cargo vans to the London Food Bank. In 2011, we did donate some play equipment to LMHC. And through the fire services, we had donated some defibrillators to Fanshawe College for training purposes only back in 2007. The latest item that we have donated was surplus or scrap material parking meters for the use of kindness meters back to go back out into the community, which was done in 2015.
Through the chair, thank you for that. It's actually very helpful to have a better understanding of the whole timeline where what we have done with different, I guess, contributions to different community organizations. I just want to clarify, though, we don't have any sort of policy on the books that really guide this process. It's more when the asks come in, we just deal with it.
Our current policy, which is found under the procurement of goods and services policy, is that any excess or surplus equipment, once it gets identified by that service area that it is surplus, it is identified for use for other service areas, and in the event that it is not required, we put it out for auction to maximize revenue return. And as the city treasurer identified earlier, fleet services goes through equipment in their life cycle generally every 6 to 7 years, and they count on the auction proceeds from those vehicles to procure the replacement vehicles. So we do have a process.
Mayor Brown.
Thank you very much, Chair. I think this is an excellent idea and a good opportunity for us to support a key community partner. We've made a commitment to the Million Tree Challenge. We can't do that on our own. We've been very clear about that. We need other organizations to work as hard as they can with their largely volunteer contingent of people that really care about our community. And this is a $10,000 notional loss. But the benefit that comes from this is, I think, much, much greater than that. And so I certainly understand our policy, and 99 times out of 100 would want to follow it. But this seems very reasonable to move in this direction. So I'd be willing to make the appropriate motion.
Mayor Brown, are you looking to have staff report back with a recommendation and a source of financing for that? It sounds like maybe we'll need to pay for it from a different reserve fund and reimburse the fleet fund. Is that what you're looking to do? Okay. Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Van Holst, okay. Any discussion on that now that it's been moved and seconded? No. It sounds like you got the report ready to go. Mr. Collins got all the information about what's happened before. Let's open the vote after we give the clerk a little bit of time and perhaps the language again. So I think the idea is to have civic administration report back to committee with the source of financing for the vehicle donation and a process. Yeah. For this specific one, not an overall process. Okay. Mayor Brown, seconded by Councillor Van Holst. Okay, let's have that up on the screen. Make everyone see the motion there. If you click on current item. Look good? Just while we're waiting, I imagine that the report back could come fairly quickly. And just looking to Mr. Shepherd, that like a quick report back would be fine in terms of timelines. Yeah, okay. Okay, Mayor Brown is in favor. Councillor Van Holst, does that match what you were looking for in terms of the language?
Closing the vote, and that motion carries 5-0.
Okay, now I'd like to look if there's any deferred matters or additional business. Okay, not seeing any. I have a motion to go into closed session. We have a number of items, 5 of them. Most of them are related to solicitor-client privilege advice and litigation. One of them is related to security of property, the reasons. I see Mayor Brown moving that, seconded by Deputy Mayor Hubert. can do that on the screen. Have that up on the screen. We're headed to committee room 3. Since there was no additional business, we will likely adjourn from committee room 3. We'll open the door and go back into public session before we do that.
Closing the vote, that motion carries 5-0.